We are a women's outdoor travel company, and we exist to craft unforgettable experiences for women. We travel to over 100 destinations every year, with over 1,000 women travelers joining us annually. Each trip is led by one of our 30 plus guides. All are women with incredible travel and extensive leadership skills. So why are we doing this webinar today? So along with being our adventure specialist here at AGC, I also have a degree in health and exercise science from Colorado State University. And I've worked extensively in the fitness industry with a variety of different ages and fitness levels. And we wanted to do this webinar because we noticed a high amount of our travelers unable to go on their adventures due to knee pain and knee injuries occurring. And, we all understand that frustration of you have an injury, it's really disappointing and frustrating, and it just stops you from being able to do those things that you really enjoy. So we hope that this educational webinar today will be really helpful for proper training for your knees and to help you wherever you are in that training journey and fitness journey. And then just a few things before we go ahead and get started for today. So I just want to ask everyone if you can just keep your microphones off during the presentation, and feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout this presentation when you do have a question. That way you don't have to be thinking about like, oh, what was my question? Or, you can just drop them in as you go, and then we'll cover them at the end of the trip. And then I just wanted to let you all know that this presentation will be recorded. So we're going to be sending it out tomorrow if there's anything you want to go through again. So I think we're all ready. So let's go ahead and get started. And then
go ahead. Nope,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to introduce you, Becky, or did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you can start and I'll supplement.
Okay. All right, so we have our co-host today, Becky Rupp, and she's the owner of Trailblazer Wellness. And then if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I started at Trailblazer Wellness 7 years ago, actually, to help other women with preparing for adventure trips. I've had a certification in personal training since 2012, and I had a corporate job though, so maybe like a lot of you or some of you may have retired from that space. And as I was transitioning out of my corporate role, I wanted to really use my personal training background as well as the health coaching certification that I got and combine it with my love for adventure travel, again, to support others in pursuing their adventure dreams. I had been on several trips where I'd seen people struggle or just not really be able to enjoy themselves. And I know, we invest so much time and money and just excitement into these trips that being able to do them well and feeling strong is great. It is just like what everybody wants. Everybody wins when that happens. So I started this business, and over the last 7 years, I've worked with more than 100 clients, many coming from Adventures in Good Company, as well as some other tour operators and various sources. I work with people all over the country virtually, and also I work with some people in the gym here where I live in central Colorado in the mountains. And so I have that hands-on in-person experience as well as the virtual setup too. So it's been really fun, and I'm super excited to talk about this because I have my own knee journey, which I will share in a little bit.
Well, thank you so much, Becky, for introducing yourself and helping us get started. And so where we wanted to start on this webinar is really just why our knees hurt. And so I wanted to start out with the structure of the knee. So, and why it makes them more susceptible to injury and to pain as well. So the knee is actually the most commonly injured joint in the body. And there's a few different factors that cause that. So the knee is a hinge joint. A hinge joint is a joint that is shaped to bend and extend forward and back. So how we can straighten our knee and then contract our knee. So that is the plane of motion that the knee is meant to move in. So the joint is actually comprised of the meeting point of the femur and the tibia. Your femur is the bone in your thigh, and then your tibia is the shin bone. And so the next bony portion of the knee is the patella. And the patella is actually considered a floating bone. And interestingly, when we're born, when we're babies, our patella is actually just cartilage. It's not bone. And between the ages of 2 and 6, the patella actually becomes a piece of bone. So that's a little piece of information right there. And then, so where the tibia and then where the femur and the tibia meet, that's where we have a layer of articular cartilage. So these bones are not actually meant to be touching one another. There is cartilage that sits between those two. And then right there is where you have your meniscus. And your meniscus is a circular and then a C shape here. So they sit like this, and they are the cushioning and the shock absorbers of the knee. And then the patella is actually held in place by 4 different ligaments. So you have the ACL, the LCL, the MCL, and the PCL. And also the patella sits, it sits like right underneath where the femur and the tibia attach to one another. So it sits kind of in the front below on the knee. And the ACL and the LCL, so their purpose is actually to stabilize the femur and the tibia from sliding too far forward and too far back. So that's the purpose of those ligaments. And then the PCL and the MCL, they help prevent excessive side-to-side movement. You also have in the structure of the knee, you have something called your patella tendon. This is a tendon that's located at the base of the patella, and it actually connects the patella to the top of the tibia, so that to the top of that shin bone there. And then also in the knee, so encapsulating the knee as well, because we have all these different tendons and ligaments, you also have a thin membrane. It's called the synovial membrane. And this actually encapsulates the joint and produces something called synovial fluid. And this fluid helps lubricate the joint during use. And really interestingly, when the joint is at rest, the synovial fluid will actually just sit in between those two bones. It'll sit between the femur and the tibia, and it'll sit there. And then when we start using the joint, that synovial fluid will spread out and lubricate the entirety of the joint. And so injuries and pain to the knee are just really common because of the complex nature of this joint. I mean, you have these two bones sitting here on each other, then you have cartilage, then you have a floating bone, then you have like all these different ligaments here, and then you have like another ligament connecting in the front. So there's just a lot going on within the knee joint, especially also with it being a hinge joint. But it's a hinge joint that's being forced to move in different planes of motion rather than just like that forward and back motion. And so it's also like holding our full body weight as well on a constant basis. And so there's just like a couple different factors that bring into that joint being more susceptible. Knee injuries as well for all of us, for women, they're also more common than they are for men. So this is due to something called our Q angle. So the Q angle is the angle from the top of the femur to the tibia. So it's actually the angle of our hips coming down to our knee. And so the wider your angle is, actually in general, just the more stress and force that it's going to put on those two bones right there. So, you know, Q angle, that's not something we can really change. You know, that's just how our bodies are set up. But there are a lot of things that we can actually do to decrease the likelihood of injury and degeneration just over time with using the knee and its components. So these things will include regular strength training. Flexibility training is really, really important. And then also proper body alignment as well. For example, if our hips are out of alignment, you know, that will put our knee out of alignment, that will put our ankle out of alignment. Or if our, you know, our head comes too far forward, is not sitting in proper alignment, it actually causes the hips to pop forward. And so we get these misalignments, which cause abnormal pulling and twisting on different joints. And so, you know, even just like focusing, you know, looking at body alignment, strength training, flexibility, that's going to be so incredibly helpful. And so now Becky's going to talk about the historical reasons why we're more likely to suffer from knee pain.
Yeah, so that was actually on the other slide. It was kind of my idea of a funny picture of a little event we had in my town where we did a retro back to the 70s and 80s dance aerobic classes. I bet a lot of you remember this, right? So some of the historical reasons that women are a little bit more prone to knee injuries include the fact that most of us, myself included, I'm in my mid 50s. I didn't do any strength training, or very, very little strength training in my youth. And, those of us who did play sports, we were not encouraged to do the kind of strengthening work that the boys were. So we might have suffered some additional injury as a result, and we also just don't have that background and support system in place, or we haven't in the past, potentially leading up to where we are today. So the good news is, well, we can't change our history and we can't necessarily change our body structure, but there are absolutely things that we can do right now that will have a positive impact on our knee situation. So we can move forward a couple of slides. So we listed some of the injuries and the things that are going on with people as we get older. We've used our bodies a lot. We may have osteoarthritis. We might have some damage, some past history of injuries, various injuries. And those may show up in different ways for different people, but they, as Natasha alluded to, and we'll go into more detail, the good news is there are a lot of things that we can do to impact this. And the types of things that we can do that she already mentioned, the strengthening, the flexibility work, and also just being very mindful of our training will make a difference in most of these situations. So let's go forward into that. Let's keep going. So we wanted to talk about a little bit about myth busting, bad knees versus undertrained knees. Yes, there are people who've had, maybe some severe injuries or, have a really, big Q angle or whatever. But there's also this situation where training can make a difference. 60 to 80% of the people with knee conditions, including osteoarthritis, meniscal tears, and, past ACL, like redos, why I'm missing the word right now, surgeries or even replacements, they can make meaningful improvements in pain and function just through these kinds of activities. That's an NIH study that showed that the key is consistency and adhering to what you need to do, whether it's as prescribed by a PT, work with your physical therapist, work with a personal trainer, working with experts and professionals that can help you on your journey. I worked at a place called Hinge Health for a while. If anybody has access to that program, it is for all kinds of different joint conditions, but I literally had clients who were like, I could barely, walk. And, after a few months of consistency, three to four times a week, they were like bounding up the stairs and ready to go. I've had clients that I've worked with before adventure trips who have had knee replacements, who have had a past history of an ACL tear and repair, all kinds of different things. And we'll actually hear from one of my clients a little bit later with her story about recovering from having knee challenges all the way through to hiking to Everest Base Camp. So it is possible. All right, let's go the next one. So some of the things that may be happening, I'll go through this pretty quick because Natasha covered it really well before. The body mechanics, you can have weakness where our bodies are weak, they will overcompensate. Like other muscles will take over. If you have weak glutes, your quads, your hamstrings. Your body wants to make things easier, and it'll figure out a way to do that, but it is not necessarily doing you any favors. It's doing you a favor in the short term, but then things just, kind of just get all out of whack. Tightness, range of motion, all those things can contribute to these kind of knee situations. The footwear, your pack setup. So even the factors like that, it's not just your body, it's like what you put on your body and put on your feet. Those need to be appropriate for the activity, balancing loads. And we'll have some resources related to this in the follow-up email after the webinar, so that you can really dig in and get a lot of good information on these factors. The other thing that I see so much is like hiking volume and technique can really make a difference in your knees. Too much too soon, very common. People are like, oh my God, my trip is coming up. I need to go out and like hike every day. And your body needs recovery. That's when the magic happens, is you need to like build up your body, but you need to have the recovery time so that your muscles can actually like repair and grow back together and build up stronger. But so if you just go out and pound it out every day, you are not giving your muscles enough time to recover. And then there are some techniques like descending technique and things that we will, again, cover in more detail coming up. Next. So I did, as I said before, I have my own knee pain story. 30 years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, I did a 50-kilometer hike in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Shenandoah National Park. It was a beautiful day. I trained for months in advance. I did a lot of hiking and going to the gym, but I wasn't really doing any strength training. This was like, the early mid-90s, and it just really wasn't like a thing for me anyway. And afterwards, for at least a month afterwards, I could like literally almost not walk downstairs. So it was terrible. And so that short-term pain, I went to the doctor and she was like, yeah, your quads weren't strong enough. I'm like, well, how are my quads not strong enough? I hiked and prepared for this for months in advance. So I kind of was like, okay, whatever. But then for years after that, I had to build up really gradually before any bigger hike, or else my left knee would stop me. It would be like, nope, you're done. We're not doing this anymore. So then when I became a personal trainer in like 2012, and I studied about this, I was like, oh, okay, maybe there really was something to this. And I, incorporated strength training into my life and still did all my, running and hiking and biking and stuff. And I managed it. I managed it pretty well. I made some mistakes sometimes. I would go out, and I went out and did a 14er a few years ago when I hadn't really been training. And sure enough, the last 2 miles were miserable. Well, then 3 years ago, I broke my fibula. This is me on my knee scooter, and I was no weight bearing on my right foot. My left knee was the problem. Right foot was in that boot for 8 weeks. I just was doing everything on my left side. And then when I, recovered from that and rebuilt my strength, I did Kilimanjaro 2 years ago, almost exactly. And I was terrified of the elevation loss. I was like, I can climb all day long, but that elevation loss is going to kill me. 7,000 feet of elevation loss, and I had no knee pain at all. So I know it's possible, and there's variations of, there's definitely different kinds of circumstances, but I just, put that out there to hopefully give you some hope. All right. So let's move into the specifics of your prevention toolkit. So if you haven't already gotten the impression that strength training is a thing, it most certainly is. That and continued PT. I know a lot of people, and we got in some questions from people who, who have had surgery, like I said, knee replacements, other kinds of situations. If you've had PT in the past, keep those exercises handy. You don't have to necessarily do all of them, but you may want to bring them back in and even consult with a physical therapist about how to balance and incorporate strength training with some of those exercises that help with the function as well. Strength training reduces your risk of injury, it increases your resilience, and if you're stronger, you can go longer. If you think about your muscles as a rope, the additional strength, when you hike a lot, you're just using the rope a lot. When you do strength training, you're actually strengthening that rope. You are making the rope stronger. And therefore, you can, for example, if you're using 60% of your strength to climb that mountain rather than 90% of your strength, then you're going to have more energy. It increases your reserve. It allows you to just enjoy the experience better. So I'm showing a few different exercises, and I know that people have had questions about specific exercises. So the far left is a wall sit. It's probably pretty handy or pretty obvious from here. The middle one is a step down. So that's lowering yourself using your knee. So it's a single leg exercise, step down, lowering, that really helps improve the stabilization of the knee. And then a single leg squat is another one that I'm doing. That is what I did for like 8 weeks. I did a single leg squat every time I used the bathroom, every time I got on and off a chair. So you don't have to, do it deep or do a lot of them, but building up the capacity to use each leg individually can be super helpful in balancing out some of those imbalances or your legs cheating for each other, and that can again throw your mechanics off. So we definitely encourage that. I have a strength training video of 3 exercises specifically for knees that will be included in the follow-up as well. So you'll get some real world things to do. Let's talk about the cardio training. So I referenced this before, but the kinds of cardio or hiking training that you do make a difference as well. Increasing your volume gradually. So kind of a rule of thumb is 10 to 20% increase in volume per week. So if you're walking or hiking 10 miles a week, you would add 1 more mile the next week, and then kind of build up over time. This could even be reduced more to like 5% if you have a history of knee issues or you start to experience knee pain as you're progressing. That's a signal, of your body to say, hey, we need more recovery. We need a little bit more grace along the way to be able to build up that capacity. So too much too soon is a big error, but gradually building up is definitely feasible and can be really beneficial. A lot of my clients come to me about 3 months out, but I've had clients come to me 6 to 9 months out before their trip and say, hey, look, I know I really need to take my time because of my history of, issues, and it works really well that way. Definitely include downhill training. Sometimes I see people who are just like, get on that treadmill and crank up the incline. That only works your muscles one way. The downhill training, it's an extension of your muscles instead of more of an extension than a contraction. So the downhill training is absolutely important. However you can do it. I mean, even a little nominal hill. I've worked with people in Florida in all kinds of flat spaces, garages, a parking garage, downhill stairs, buildings with stairs so you can go up and down, sand dunes. I mean, people get really creative. Bridges, things like that. I had another client on like Hilton Head Island, and she would like do the bridges and try to get in some uphill and downhill that way. And then finally, take those rest and recovery days. That is, again, what the time when your muscles are rebuilding. And it's really important for us to take some time to relax. All right. Then there's pre and post hike stretching. So the pre-hike stretching prepares your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons, all those things. Like, hey guys, we're doing this. Okay, let's get ready. So it's the pre-hike stretching is usually more of a dynamic stretching situation. So, gentle movement, easing into it. You kind of warm up. Improves the blood flow and the elasticity. Natasha explained about the synovial fluid, and like telling that fluid, it's like, okay, it's time to do your job after you've maybe been sitting in the car or whatever, getting ready to go. And we have an expression that the motion is the lotion for our muscles and our joints. So getting things started. And then post-hike stretching, just again, kind of like settling things down. Those tend to be a little bit more static stretches, nothing too extreme, but just kind of letting the muscles know, hey, we're done with activity for now. We're just gonna lengthen out the stuff that's been tightened as we've put forth the effort and get them back to a more like neutral state, if you will. All right, next one. And then on the trail, while you're out there, trekking poles. You'll see a lot of trekking poles in pictures here. And if you are not already part of the trekking pole tribe, again, we will have a link to a resource for you. But I got my first set of trekking poles after that hiking incident 30 years ago. And they have been pretty much my constant companion ever since. I kind of freaked out after that happened. And I was like, I've got like 30, 40, 50 more years of hiking to do. What can I do? And I found trekking poles and I absolutely love them. Some downhill tactics, and some people that specifically asked about this as well: shorter steps, soft knees, and mini switchbacks. This can look a little funny, and I had a client tell me, oh, I do these like little mini switchbacks, and sometimes people behind me are confused, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I do them, absolutely. Especially when I was going down Kilimanjaro, heck yeah, I was like bing, 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 all the way down. Those little mini switchbacks just cuts the angle, or allows your knees to adjust and not be in such a extended long extension, which puts you at risk for injury. And then when you do take those rest stops with the group, whether you're with the group or if you're out hiking on a training hike by yourself, do a few stretches to just, again, like balance out those muscles, kind of like bring them back into alignment and get them ready to go again. All right. So I have Karen is on, and she's going to share a little bit about her journey. She's one of my clients. There she is at Everest Base Camp. So Karen, if you can come off of mute.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, that's me. That was a big adventure Everest Base Camp. So just give you a little bit of a backdrop of my story. I actually injured my knee when I was in my 20s, and I never felt it got back to normal. So I never did really a lot of hiking. Every time I was like running or biking, my knee would always act up. And I actually did strength training in the gym, and I actually worked out, but clearly not enough to really make sure that my knees were okay. So fast forward in 2018, I found myself alone and I wanted a new hobby. And so what did I do? Of course, I thought I could do some hiking, and I started to do some hiking at that time. And also I think maybe I got aware, or new research was coming out, that actually if you use it, it's better for you than if you actually don't do anything. And I don't know, but I read a little bit up on that, like walking or something would really strengthen your knee. So what did I do? I went up here. I'm in San Diego. I went up the highest mountain. It's a 900 feet elevation gain. I came down. I was crying in pain. So it was so bad, I couldn't even do this little hike. So from then on, I actually decided not to give up, but just continue. So I did little hikes here and there, walking. I joined a hiking group. I did a bit more. And then in 2022, after COVID, I did Wales hiking with AGC. So I have done multiple hikes with AGC now, multiple trips with AGC, and they're actually all super fun. So I highly recommend it if you haven't done it. I have 5 done by now. So I did that, and it went well because I trained. I was very careful. I started to use hiking poles. And I was okay because it was a very gentle hike. It wasn't very strenuous. And of course, then in 2023, I believe AGC had the Everest Base Camp. That was the year I turned 60. And I said, heck, what you're going to do when you turn 60. And I signed up for Everest Base Camp. And that's when I got also in touch with Becky. And I did a 6-month program with her because I had absolutely really no idea what I was doing. And as she said, do it langsam and gradually. When I saw the program first, I'm like, what the heck? That doesn't look like a whole much that I have to do and to train, but also had like 6 months time. So I started very gradually with her, did all the strength training exercises, found that flexibility and actually balancing, just making sure that all your little muscles in your feet and your knee are activated, was really helpful for me. And in the middle of it, I had knee pain again, and my knee was acting up again. And so we had to adjust my training plan, and we did it because I had enough time to build up with that. And so then I went off to the Everest Base Camp, and except for like one day downhill where I didn't use my poles, I had no problems at all. And that was a huge accomplishment for me to just do that. I've never done anything like this before. The following year, Becky did Kilimanjaro. I also did it with her. And it was the same thing. We did the training together, and then the 7,000 feet downhill were, for me, were really no problem. So I could do it. So my takeaway from that is really, if you want to do something you have never done, just slowly build up to it. Do not too much. Do the training. I have to say, get a coach, because now I know what I'm doing, but I had no idea when I started off with that. I continue to hike. I always use poles. I always stretch. I still do balancing. And a couple of weeks ago here in San Diego, I did like a 11-mile hike with 4,500 feet elevation gain and elevation loss, and I made it, and I was very happy. I had no pain at all. And so all this training that I did over the past 5 years actually allowed me to do this and continue to do it. In the meantime, I have done the Lost City Trek in Colombia, and I have done West Highland Way in Scotland. I'm going to go for a hiking trip in Georgia now, and I'm really eyeing the Mont Blanc, Tour de Mont Blanc for next year. So 7 years ago, I didn't think it was possible that I could do something like this. And now I'm actually feel not only confident if I train for it, but also feel like even if I have some knee pain, I know what to do. I know what helps me, and I know how to handle all of that.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, it's been amazing working with Karen over the years. And also, I know I have a couple other clients on here. Thank you for your support. But yeah, I mean, you can do it on your own as well. And just using these tips and getting some support, maybe locally with someone local, or I'd be happy to talk to people as well about their, kind of specific situation. So if we go to the next slide, just to recap, this knee pain can be mitigated. We've already beat the drum on the strength, the stretching, the gradual buildup, and we just encourage everybody to try these techniques before throwing in the towel. We want you to come join us for the fun. And yes, thanks, Karen, for sharing your story. I did want to let you know that I do offer, these customized training and coaching packages. AGC folks get 10% off, so there's that. There's a QR code on your screen, and there'll be a link sent out with the follow-up email that you can get a free 30-minute consultation session. So I love to talk about this stuff, obviously, so please hit me up. And then also on my website, I have some additional webinars that I've done on my own on when to start training, fitting and fitness, altitude, high altitude, and several others. So I encourage you to check those out. Those are all free as well.